8 months later, I could still remember the sound the banquet staff made when they began unlocking the empty chairs. It was a soft, metallic click, almost polite, repeated around 6 tables reserved for my family. My mother would not answer her phone. My father had blocked my number. My younger sister's call went straight to voicemail, while 140 guests waited for me to walk down the aisle. Before I tell you why my entire family believed I had canceled my own wedding, I hope you're doing well wherever you're listening from. Stay with me, because the detail hidden in one message changed everything. And please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happened next. The ceremony was supposed to begin in 20 minutes. Orange blossoms filled the bridal suite with a sweet, almost citrusy scent. From the service corridor came the crisp clatter of ice striking a silver bucket. I stood with one hand resting on the back of a cold wooden chair, staring through the open doors at 6 tables covered in ivory linen. Each place card carried a familiar name. My mother, Elaine Foster. My father, Grant. My sister, Erica. My aunt, Celia. 3 cousins, 2 uncles, and relatives who had spent months discussing hotel rooms, carpool plans, and what they intended to wear. Every chair was empty. Hannah Price, my maid of honor and closest friend, came toward me holding her phone against her chest. She had already spoken to the inn's front desk. "The Foster block was canceled yesterday morning," she said quietly. "All of it. The rooms, the shuttle reservations, everything." I looked at her without understanding. They canceled their rooms? The front desk said the guests did. They started calling shortly after 9 yesterday. That was Friday morning, approximately 31 hours before the ceremony. I had arrived at the inn later that afternoon and spent the evening at the rehearsal dinner with Owen's family, my friends, and several coworkers. No one had mentioned a cancellation because, as far as we knew, there had not been one. I called my mother first. The phone rang until voicemail answered. I left no message. My father's number did not ring at all. A recorded voice informed me that the person I was trying to reach was unavailable. When Hannah called him from her phone, his line rang normally. He had blocked me. I called Erica next. Her voicemail greeting was the same warm, carefully paced voice she used in promotional videos for Harbor Light, the nonprofit she had founded 6 years earlier. "Hi, you've reached Erica. Leave a message, and remember that healing begins when we choose honesty." I ended the call before the tone. For several seconds, I simply stood there. I did not cry. I did not feel calm either. My mind moved through practical details, because that was what it had been trained to do. I worked as an archivist at a community college library. When something did not make sense, I preserved the original record before opinions began changing it. "Hannah, take pictures of the seating chart and the empty tables," I said. "Get the time from the front desk and the name of the employee who confirmed the cancellations. Do not contact my family again yet." Her eyebrows rose slightly, but she nodded. That was when Owen found me. He had been waiting in a private room across the courtyard, so we would not see each other before the ceremony. Someone must have told him something was wrong, because he came through the service entrance with his jacket, unbuttoned and worry, written plainly across his face. He stopped a few feet away from me. "Do you want to postpone?" he asked. "We can wait. We can move everything inside. We can do whatever you need." He did not say that his family was all I needed now. He did not tell me to forget the people who had raised me. Owen understood that love did not become harmless simply because it was absent. I looked through the glass doors. My coworkers had already taken their seats. The director of my library sat beside the woman who had trained me during my first year. Friends from college were laughing softly near the back. Owen's parents were speaking with the officiant, while his younger brother tried to calm 2 restless children in the front row. 140 people had traveled to the mountains in November, because Owen and I had invited them to witness the beginning of our marriage. My family had made a choice, or someone had made one for them. Either way, I was not giving that choice the rest of the day. I wasn't going to make 140 people wait while I begged 6 empty tables to love me, I said. Owen studied my face for a moment, then nodded. "What do you want me to do?" "Go back. Let the ceremony start on time." He reached for my hand, squeezed it once, and left without trying to make the decision his. I gave my phone to Hannah. "Keep it until after the ceremony," I told her. "Even if they call." The music began 3 minutes later. I had imagined that walk for months, I had imagined looking toward my mother and seeing whether she cried. I had imagined my father standing stiffly beside her, uncomfortable with public emotion, but present anyway. I had imagined Erica smiling from the front row, even though she was no longer my maid of honor. Instead, I walked past 6 empty tables visible through the reception doors. Halfway down the aisle, I saw one of my older coworkers rise to her feet. The woman beside her followed. Then Owen's parents stood, along with our friends and the rest of the guests. It was not rehearsed, and it was not dramatic. No one applauded or tried to turn my pain into a public moment. They simply stood as I walked past them. Owen waited beneath an arch wrapped in greenery and white roses. When I reached him, he took both my hands. During his vows, he did not promise to replace anyone. He promised that no absence would be allowed to define the life we built together. I believed him. For those 25 minutes, I let myself be happy. I heard our guests laugh when Owen stumbled over one word and started again. I felt the warmth of the ring as he pushed it gently over my knuckle. When the officiant pronounced us married, the sound that filled the room did not come from 6 empty tables. It came from the people who had shown up. After the ceremony, the venue manager approached me near the ballroom doors. "What would you like us to do with the family tables?" she asked. I looked at the empty place settings, 6 floral centerpieces, dozens of unused glasses, chairs arranged for people who had decided they would rather believe a message than speak to me. "Remove 4 tables," I said. "Combine the other 2, and reseat anyone who would be more comfortable there. Some of my coworkers brought elderly relatives. Give them the extra space." The manager hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Within minutes, the staff began clearing plates and unlocking chairs. The room changed shape around us. The empty section became smaller, then disappeared into the rest of the reception. I did not pretend the absence no longer hurt. I simply refused to frame the entire evening around it. Owen and I took photographs by the stone terrace while the last autumn light settled over the mountains. I ate dinner. I danced with his father after mine failed to arrive. Hannah made a toast about the first time she saw Owen bring me coffee, without interrupting me while I was cataloging a damaged collection. Guests laughed, and for several hours the laughter did not feel stolen from me. Shortly after the ceremony, one of my coworkers posted an Instagram story. We had asked everyone not to share anything before the vows, because Owen and I wanted the ceremony private, but after that, we did not mind. The video showed us leaving the chapel while our guests stood on both sides of the path. It lasted 7 seconds. Those 7 seconds were what finally reached my Aunt Celia. Hannah returned my phone near the end of dinner. There were no missed calls from my parents or Erica. There was one message from Celia asking me to call immediately. Before I could, her name appeared on the screen. I stepped into a quiet corridor outside the ballroom and answered. "Camille?" Her voice sounded breathless. "Where are you?" "At my wedding." There was a pause long enough for me to hear the music through the closed doors behind me. "Why did you cancel it?" she asked. "I didn't." Another pause followed, but this one felt different. "What do you mean you didn't?" "The wedding happened exactly as planned. You saw the video. I thought it was old footage. Your mother said you canceled everything." I leaned against the wall. "My mother said that?" "She called me yesterday morning. She said you had finally decided to cut off the family and that we needed to respect your boundary." Celia explained that an official notice had arrived through our wedding guest portal. It said the ceremony and reception had been canceled due to an irreparable family conflict. A second message had followed, written as though it came directly from me. Elaine had then called several relatives. By the time Celia spoke to my cousins, they had already canceled their hotel rooms. Each group believed everyone else had received the same explanation. "Why didn't anyone call me?" I asked. The message told us not to. "That has never stopped this family before." "I know." Shame entered her voice, but the second message was personal. It mentioned things you were angry about. Your father thought you were humiliating him. Your mother said calling would prove we did not respect you. "Forward everything to me," I said, "not screenshots. Send the original email and text relay if you still have them." Celia did not ask why. The messages arrived less than a minute later. The first was a formal cancellation notice, addressed only to the guest segment labeled Foster Family. The second had been sent through the portal's private reply system. I read it once. Then I read it again. Most of it sounded close enough to my voice to fool someone who wanted to be offended. It accused my mother of refusing accountability. It said my father had spent my whole life standing beside her while she harmed me. It told my relatives that contacting me would be another violation of my boundaries. Then I reached the final paragraph. I will not spend my wedding begging this family to keep a room for me again. Room 214 was enough. My fingers stopped moving. The music behind the ballroom door seemed to recede, replaced by the remembered hum of an old motel air conditioner and rain striking a second-floor window. I had been 22 years old the night my mother told me to leave home. I had checked into a motel near the highway. The plastic sleeve around my room key had the number 214 written across it in blue ink. I had called one person, Erika. She had been 17 then. She had slipped out of the house, taken a cab she could not afford, and knocked on my motel door after midnight. I had let her inside. We sat on the floor beside the bed because neither of us knew what else to do. At some point, I had said, I think I just found out that home isn't where people keep a room for you. Erika was the only person I had ever told the room number. Hannah knew I had stayed at a motel because she picked me up the next morning, but I had met her in the parking lot. Celia knew there had been a fight with my mother, but not where I went. My parents knew I had left, yet I had never told them where I slept. The number was not in my journal. It was not in the email I sent Hannah. The only physical record was the old key sleeve I had kept in a private box for 16 years. Room 214 did not prove Erika had sent the message. It proved that whoever wrote it had access to something I had shared only with her. My training took over before anger could. I downloaded the original email, exported the header, saved the text relay, and forwarded copies to a private archive Owen and I used for important records. I asked Celia not to delete anything and not to contact the rest of the family yet. Then I opened the wedding portal. The primary dashboard did not show device details or an IP address. It showed only a summary of recent account activity. At 9:07 on Friday morning, a co-host credential had accessed the foster family guest segment. At 9:12, the cancellation notice had been created. At 9:19, the first personalized message had been sent. I had created only one co-host account. 3 months earlier, when Erika was still supposed to be my maid of honor, I had given her access so she could help manage family RSVPs. After I replaced her with Hannah, I changed her editing permissions but failed to remove the credential entirely. At the bottom of the activity page, beside the timestamp that had emptied 6 tables at my wedding, was the name attached to that account. Erika Foster. By the time Owen and I reached our hotel room, it was almost midnight. My wedding dress felt heavier than it had that morning, and the pins in my hair had started pulling at my scalp. I carried my shoes in one hand and my phone in the other. Owen closed the door behind us and loosened his tie. We should call her now, he said, before she has time to delete anything. We don't know what she can delete. We know her account sent the messages. We know her account was used. He looked at me as though the distinction did not matter. To me, it mattered completely. An account name was not the same as proof of who had touched the keyboard. Room 214 told me Erika was involved, but I was not going to accuse her publicly before I understood how much she had done and what records still existed. I sat at the small desk near the window and opened the wedding portal. First, I changed the primary password. Second, I removed every remaining co-host permission. Third, I submitted a written request asking the provider to preserve all server logs, message history, account changes, and access records connected to the foster family guest segment. I saved a copy of the request with the exact time it was sent. That's enough for tonight, I said. Owen looked at the screen. You're stopping? I'm preserving the door before we search the house. He exhaled through his nose, still angry, but he closed the laptop. We did not spend our wedding night building a case against my sister. We ate the slices of cake the venue had packed for us. Owen opened the small gift Hannah had hidden in his suitcase, a framed photograph from the afternoon he proposed. I removed 23 pins from my hair while he counted them and claimed the stylist had used enough metal to reinforce a bridge. For nearly an hour, we were simply married. The next morning, I woke before Owen and lay still beneath the white hotel sheets, listening to the heater click on and off, the message from Celia returned to me one line at a time. Room 214 was enough. I had not thought about that room in years. In September of 2009, I was 22 and saving for graduate school. My grandmother had died the year before and left me a payable-on-death savings account containing a little over $18,000. It was not a fortune. It was enough to cover tuition, books, and part of my living expenses if I remained careful. The money belonged to me. There was no probate dispute and no family trust my mother controlled. Elaine could not legally take it. She could only make refusing her feel like betrayal. Erica was 17 then, and preparing to begin college the following year. My parents had underestimated tuition, and Elaine decided the simplest solution was for me to withdraw my grandmother's money and give most of it to Erica. She presented the idea during dinner as though the decision had already been made. "You can take classes later," she told me. "Erica has one chance to start properly. I have one chance to start properly too. You're older. You know how to survive disappointment." Grant kept cutting the chicken on his plate. I asked whether they had considered loans, scholarships, a less expensive school, or Erica working during the summer. Elaine said every option I offered proved I cared more about money than my sister. When I still refused, she stood, walked to the hallway closet, and pulled out an old duffel bag. "If this family means so little to you," she said, "you should stop using this house like it belongs to you." I looked at my father. He did not tell her to stop. He did not tell me to stay. I packed enough clothes for several days and drove until I found a roadside motel near the highway. The neon sign outside flickered between red and darkness. The clerk pushed a plastic key card across the counter inside a paper sleeve marked 214 inches blue ink. The room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. The air conditioner rattled beneath the window. I sat on the edge of the bed with my duffel at my feet and tried to decide who I could call without having to explain why my own mother had thrown me out over money she had never owned. I called Erica. She answered in a whisper. "What happened?" "Mom told me to leave." "Because of the college money?" I said yes. Erica was quiet for several seconds. Then she asked where I was. I told her the motel name and room number. She took a cab without telling our parents. Nearly an hour later, someone knocked softly on my door. Erica stood in the hallway wearing pajama pants beneath a long coat. She had brought 2 bottles of water, a packet of crackers, and $37 she had taken from a jar in her closet. She sat with me on the floor beside the bed. For a few hours, she was not the favored daughter or the reason my mother wanted my savings. She was simply my little sister, frightened by what our family had become. At some point, I told her, "I think I just found out home isn't where people keep a room for you." She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I'll always keep one for you," she said. That promise had stayed with me longer than the room itself. The next morning, Erica left before sunrise. Hannah picked me up in the parking lot after I emailed her that I had spent the night at a motel near the highway. I never gave Hannah the room number. I never wrote it in that email, in my journal, or in the letter I later drafted for therapy. The only physical record I kept was the paper key sleeve. I had placed it in a private box with my grandmother's bank letter and several school documents. It had moved with me through 4 apartments and into the home Owen and I shared. Erica was the only person I had ever told. When Owen woke, I explained everything. He sat on the edge of the bed, listening without interrupting. "She promised she would always keep a room for you," he said when I finished. "Yes. And then she used the number to empty your wedding." I looked toward the closed laptop. "That's what I need to prove." Hannah joined us by video call an hour later. I wanted a witness to the conversation with Erica, but I did not want to record it secretly. I put the phone on speaker and told both of them to take notes. Erica answered on the 4th ring. "Camille," she said, sounding exhausted. "Thank God. I've been trying to understand what happened. You had all night to call me. I was advised not to contact you until we knew whether the portal had been compromised." Advised by whom? My team. It was the kind of answer Erica gave when she wanted an ordinary decision to sound institutional. "The co-host account was yours," I said. "An account can be hacked. The provider says there was no password reset. That doesn't mean someone couldn't have accessed it." I did not argue. "Who knew about room 214? The silence lasted 2 seconds too long. Then Erica said, "You told people about the motel." "I told Hannah I stayed at a motel. Who knew the room number?" I don't know, Camille. You talked about that night for years. No, I didn't. You may not remember every person you told. I remember that. Her voice softened. You were under enormous stress yesterday. Is it possible you wrote something, scheduled it, and forgot? Owen's hand closed around the edge of the desk. I kept my voice level. Are you suggesting I canceled my own wedding, personalized messages to my relatives, and erased my memory of doing it? I'm saying trauma can affect recall. There it was. Erica had spent years learning how to use therapeutic language as a shield. She never had to call me a liar if she could call me confused. I asked you one question, I said. Who knew room 214? I'm not going to participate in an interrogation. Then we're done. Camille, please don't make decisions while you're dysregulated. I ended the call. Hannah released a breath from her side of the screen. She knew exactly what you were asking. I know. I wrote down the time of the call, Erica's wording, the length of the pause after I mentioned the room, and her claim that I might have sent the messages myself. Notes were not proof, but they preserved what had been said before anyone revised it. That afternoon, the guest portal provider responded. The support representative confirmed that there had been no password reset, recovery request, or sign-in from an unknown account. The activity had come through the co-host credential registered to Erica. The representative could not give me the full IP address, device identifier, or server-side access logs without a formal legal request or an authorized investigation. They did confirm those records had been preserved. The dashboard proved only that Erica's credential had been used. It did not prove who had used it. I stared at that distinction longer than I wanted to. 3 months earlier, I had removed Erica as my maid of honor after an argument about her reception toast. She wanted to turn it into a story about our family's healing journey and Harbor Light's mission. I told her my wedding was not a fundraising stage. I changed her editing permissions, but did not fully revoke the co-host credential. That was my mistake. I had left a door unlocked. Erica was still the person who appeared to have walked through it. 2 days later, Celia sent me another message. She had found a promotional brochure for Erica's upcoming memoir in an email from Harbor Light. The cover showed Erica standing in front of a dark doorway beneath the title, The Rooms We Survive. The table of contents appeared on the second page. Chapter 6 was called Room 214. I bought access to an archived recording of one of Erica's speeches. It had been filmed at a Harbor Light fundraising luncheon 18 months earlier. Erica stood on stage beneath warm lights and told the audience she had been 17 when her family threw her out because she refused to surrender money meant for her education. That had happened to me at 22. She described a motel beside a highway. She described sitting alone in a room while traffic moved beyond the window. Then she said, "That night, I learned home isn't where people keep a room for you." The audience fell silent before applauding. I paused the video. Owen stood behind my chair. She took the sentence. She took the entire night. Near the end of the speech, Erica thanked the staff members who had helped develop Harbor Light's storytelling workshops. One name caught my attention. Marisol Vega, Director of Programs and Story Sourcing. I checked more recent Harbor Light materials. Marisol's name had disappeared. There was no announcement, farewell, or explanation. During the same speech, Erica praised herself for helping Elaine and Grant keep their home when the mortgage became difficult. It explained one part of my father's silence that I had not fully understood. Erica was not only the family success story. She had made my parents financially dependent on that success. Celia later forwarded the proposal Erica's publisher had circulated to selected donors. It described room 214 inches more detail. In Erica's version, an older sister had stood beside their mother, accused Erica of being selfish, and refused to help her after she was expelled from the house. The older sister was never named. She did not need to be. Erica had not only placed herself in my motel room, she had moved me into the role of the person who had helped force her there. I continued reading. Several pages later, I found a sentence about surviving a family that treated boundaries as punishment. I knew the wording. I had written it in a letter during therapy years earlier. The letter had never been mailed, published, or posted online. I had printed one copy and left it inside a folder at my parents' house after Elaine demanded to know what I was telling my therapist. She had read it. I had seen the pages in her hand. Room 214 connected Erica to the message that emptied my family's tables. The letter connected someone else to the life Erica had built from my words. My mother had been the only person, besides me, who ever possessed a copy. I returned to work the following Monday because staying home would not have made the evidence clearer. It would only have given Erica more space inside my head. The library opened at 8. By 8:15, I was back in the climate-controlled archive room, wearing cotton gloves and examining a box of municipal records from the 1970s. Several folders had been labeled incorrectly during an earlier transfer, and my job was to determine which office had created them, when they had changed hands, and whether the order inside the box reflected the original filing system or someone's later guess. For the first time since the wedding, I recognized a problem I knew how to solve. A document did not become true because it had been filed under the right name. You had to know where it came from, who had handled it, when it had changed, and what other records existed beside it. I opened a blank spreadsheet during my lunch break. The first column was original event. The second was date Camille recorded it. Then I added who had access, first known use by Erica, changes to the story, and commercial use. I did not begin with conclusions. I began with sources. Room 214 occupied the first row. The original event had happened in September of 2009. My supporting records included the old key sleeve, a debit card charge from the motel, and Hannah's email from the following morning. Erica had first used the story publicly at least 18 months before my wedding, although I suspected she had told earlier versions in private. The next row concerned my college graduation. My parents had promised to attend, then left early to help Erica move out of her dorm after she decided she disliked her roommate. I had crossed the stage with 2 empty seats in the family section and found a voicemail afterward telling me not to be dramatic. In one of Erica's podcast interviews, she described graduating while her family chose her older sister's crisis over her. The location had changed. The year had changed. The empty seats had not. The third row came from an essay I wrote during graduate school called Quiet Houses. I had written about families that never raised their voices because one person controlled everyone through silence, withdrawal, and selective affection. Only 3 people had ever received a copy: my professor Hannah and my mother, who found it in a box when I moved apartments. A Harbor Light training booklet contained 2 sentences with the same unusual structure and nearly the same imagery. Individually, each resemblance could be dismissed. Together, they began to form a pattern. I kept the spreadsheet on an encrypted personal drive, not on the college network. I worked on it before my shift, during lunch, and for no more than an hour in the evening. I refused to turn every waking moment into an extension of Erica's choices. That rule lasted until Wednesday. Hannah called shortly after 7 that night. I found the email, she said. I was sitting at our kitchen table with Owen, sorting thank you cards. He looked up when he heard her voice through the speaker. What exactly did you find? I asked. The one you sent the morning after your mother threw you out. Hannah forwarded it while we spoke. The subject line was simply, "Are you awake?" The message had been sent at 6:43 in the morning on September 19th, 2009. I read it slowly. I'm at a motel near the highway. I'm safe. Can you pick me up in an hour? Please don't call my parents. There was no room number, no motel name, no sentence about keeping a room for me. The email proved I had been the one displaced that night. It also proved I had not given Hannah the detail used in the wedding message. I remember picking you up near the vending machines, Hannah said. You were carrying that old blue duffel bag. Erica wasn't there when I arrived. She left before sunrise. Did you ever tell me she had come? Not then. Hannah was quiet. I donated to Harbor Light after that speech, she said, the one about the motel. I knew what she meant. She had believed she was supporting Erica's recovery without realizing the story that moved her had belonged to me. I want to say something publicly, she continued. Not everything, just that you were the person I picked up. Not yet. Camille, she is already telling people you're attacking her. I know, and you're letting her. No, I'm preserving the difference between a witness and a participant in an online fight. Hannah exhaled. That sounded like something you say to students who mishandle records. It applies. She was still angry, but she agreed to save the original email in 2 formats and keep the account untouched. I asked her to write a brief note describing what she remembered now, while the details were fresh, and to separate what she knew from what I had told her later. She laughed once without humor. "You really do this for everything? I should have done it sooner." That was the part I could not avoid. Erica had not become a public figure overnight. She had spent years speaking about our family, and I had avoided most of it because listening made me feel as though I were being pulled back into a house I had already left. I had told myself that silence was a boundary. Sometimes it had been. Other times, it had simply meant I did not see what was being built with the things I had abandoned. Elaine called the next afternoon. I was in my car outside the library. I considered letting it go to voicemail, then answered because I wanted to hear what explanation she had chosen. "Camille," she began, "this has gone too far." "Which part?" "Your sister is receiving threats. I haven't contacted her audience." "You don't have to. People know there is a family conflict." Erica told them. "She did not name you. She described me accurately enough that our relatives recognized me." Elaine sighed as though I had missed the point. "Harbor Light has helped women who had nowhere else to go. Erica has built something meaningful from what our family survived." "What our family survived?" "You know what I mean." "I know what I survived." Her voice tightened. "This is exactly why Erica is frightened. You have always acted as though pain belongs to one person." "Whose pain was room 214? Silence answered first. Then Elaine said, "Families remember things differently. Erica was never thrown out of your house. She felt rejected many times. That is not the same event. You're reducing healing to a courtroom argument." "No, I'm asking where she got my letter." Elaine inhaled sharply. "What letter?" "The one I wrote during therapy. The one you read." "I have no idea what Erica has seen over the years." "You were the only person who had a copy." "That is not true. Your grandmother went through your things constantly." "My grandmother was dead when I wrote it." Another silence. This one was shorter. "You kept journals in that house for years," Elaine said. She could have read older material and repeated it to Erica before she died. The explanation arrived too quickly, as though she had prepared it for a different question. "My grandmother died in 2007, I said. "I know when my own mother died. The letter was written in 2009. Elaine's breathing changed. "You always were obsessed with dates. My job depends on them. You're trying to make your mother sound like a thief." "I'm trying to establish who had access." She shifted direction. "Erica helped us when the mortgage became difficult. She has supported this family emotionally and financially. You disappear for years, then return only to accuse everyone who stayed." "I did not disappear. I stopped allowing you to use contact as control. You see, even now you talk like a therapy worksheet. That accusation would have unsettled me once. Now it sounded familiar because Erica's public language worked the same way. Anything I said about boundaries became evidence that I was cold. Any demand for accuracy became proof that I lacked compassion. "I'm going to ask once," I said. "Did you give Erica any of my journals, letters, or essays?" "No." The answer came cleanly. Too cleanly to trust, but not enough to prove anything. "I'll contact you again when I have a more specific question." "You will not drag this family into your need to be right." "I'm not dragging anyone, I'm following what was taken." I ended the call. That evening I retrieved the folder containing the therapy letter. The paper had softened at the folds. I found the date beneath the heading and checked it against my grandmother's obituary, even though I already knew. She had been dead for 2 years. The red herring disappeared as neatly as a false label lifted from a file. Elaine had lied. That did not prove she gave the letter to Erica. It proved she had invented an impossible source to avoid answering. I examined the old folder more carefully. Near the bottom was a printed email Grant had forwarded to me in 2018, when my parents were clearing storage before replacing the carpet. His message asked whether I wanted them to keep a box labeled Camille School. Below his note was an earlier quoted header from the family email account he shared with Elaine. The body had been deleted from the printout, but the subject line remained, "Material you asked for." The recipient was Erica. The date was 4 years earlier. No attachment appeared in the printout. The quoted header did not tell me what had been sent, it gave me only a path. Grant still used that household account. Elaine did too. I did not know whether old sent messages had been retained, deleted, archived, or backed up. I also did not have the right to access the account without permission. I added the subject line to my spreadsheet and marked it unverified. Owen came home while I was staring at it. "You found something." I found a title. He read the printout. "That sounds bad." "It sounds relevant." That is the most archivist answer you could have given. "It's still true." He sat across from me. "Are you going to call your father?" "Not yet." "Why?" "Because if Elaine knows exactly what I'm looking for, she may delete it before Grant decides whether he wants to help." Owen leaned back in his chair. "You think he will?" "I think he might prefer one uncomfortable truth to another 16 years of pretending he never saw anything." I was not sure whether that counted as hope. The following morning, Erica posted a new video. I did not follow her accounts, but 3 relatives sent me the link within an hour. Hannah texted first and asked whether I wanted her to screen it before I watched. I told her no. Avoidance had already cost me enough. Erica sat in a pale chair inside Harbor Light's studio. The lighting was soft. A mug rested untouched beside her. She wore no visible jewelry except the small silver circle that had become part of her public image. "Sometimes," she began, "the people closest to us are not threatened by our pain. They are threatened by our healing when it does not center them." She did not say my name. She spoke about a family member who had spent years withholding affection, then returned when Erica's story became valuable. She said Harbor Light would not be distracted from serving women in crisis. The comments filled rapidly. Some came from people who said Erica had helped them leave violent homes, find temporary shelter, or recognize emotional abuse. Their gratitude appeared genuine. That mattered. It did not erase what she had done, but I refused to flatten every person she had helped into part of her deception. A smaller group asked what had happened. Several accused the unnamed family member of jealousy. One commenter wrote that abusers often become obsessed with technical accuracy to avoid emotional truth. Owen read that line over my shoulder. "Now I want to post." "No. She is describing you. She wants me to respond before I have the source trail. She is winning the first version of the story." "Then let her have the first version." He frowned. "I'm not surrendering," I said. "I'm refusing to let her choose the format." That afternoon, I searched Harbor Light's archived website pages. Marisol Vega had appeared in staff directories from 2020 through early 2024. She had been listed as Director of Programs and Story Sourcing, a title that suggested she would have known how personal narratives entered Harbor Light's training materials. Her name appeared in credits for 3 workshops. Then it vanished. There was no farewell announcement, no staff transition notice, and no mention of her in the annual report that followed. A later version of one workshop removed the story sourcing credit entirely. I found an old professional email address for Marisol through a conference program. I drafted a message that contained no accusation. "My name is Camille Foster. I am trying to clarify the source history of several personal narratives previously used in Harbor Light materials. Your name appears in archived credits connected to story sourcing. If you are willing to speak, I would appreciate hearing from you. I understand if you prefer not to respond." I read it twice, then sent it. No reply arrived that day. By Friday evening, my spreadsheet contained 11 rows. Some were strong, some were only questions. None explained how much Elaine had given Erica, or why Grant had allowed it to continue. I was closing my laptop when my father called. His number appeared on the screen for the first time since the wedding. I answered without greeting. Grant sounded older than he had 2 weeks earlier. "I looked at the family email," he said. I waited. "The message you asked about is still in the sent folder." What was attached? There was a rustle of paper, followed by a long breath. "Your mother sent Erica a PDF," he said. "It has your therapy letter, pages from your journal, and the essay about quiet houses." My hand tightened around the phone. "Do not forward it yet," I said. "Do not delete anything. Take screenshots showing the account, date, recipients, and attachment name. Then sign out." "Camille, can you do that?" "Yes." I heard him move toward the computer. Before he ended the call, he said one more thing. "The email is from Elaine, but Erica was the one who asked for the material. I did not go to my parents' house the moment Grant found the email. That would have been the old version of me, the one who rushed into a room already arranged by Elaine and then spent the entire conversation defending why I had entered it. Instead, I called my father back 10 minutes later. "I'll come tomorrow at 11, I said. "Owen is coming with me." There was a pause. "Your mother doesn't want him involved." "Then I won't come. This is family business." It became Owen's business when someone used my wedding account to empty 6 tables at our reception. Grant lowered his voice. "Camille, please don't make this harder." "I'm not making it harder. I'm telling you the conditions." I listed them clearly. The meeting would happen during the day. Owen would remain with me. Grant would log into the household email account himself. No one would delete, forward, rename, or print anything before I arrived. I would collect any journals, letters, school papers, or personal boxes that belonged to me. We were not coming for mediation. We were not coming to repair the family. We were coming for records. Grant agreed. Elaine called less than 5 minutes later. "You're bringing your husband into this house to inspect us?" "I'm bringing my husband because you already lied to me." "I did not lie. You said Grandma might have shared a letter written 2 years after she died." "That was a mistake. I was upset." "You were specific. You always assume the worst possible motive." "I'll be there at 11. "Camille, if you walk into this house treating your own mother like a criminal, I am not the police. I'm collecting what belongs to me." I ended the call before she could turn my boundary into another accusation. Owen drove the next morning. Raleigh was a little under 4 hours from our house, and traffic thickened as we approached the city. I watched bare trees and highway exits pass outside the window, while Owen kept both hands on the steering wheel. "You don't have to say anything in there," I told him. "I know. And if my mother tries to make you choose between supporting me and respecting her, I know that too." I looked at him. He gave me a brief smile. "You married an engineer, Camille. We do understand instructions." The house looked almost exactly as it had when I left it years earlier. The shutters had been repainted, and the oak near the driveway had grown wide enough to shade half the front yard, but the brass knocker still leaned slightly to the left. Elaine opened the door before we reached it. She did not greet Owen. Grant stood several feet behind her, wearing the gray sweater he usually saved for church or family photographs. His face looked tired. "You said 11, Elaine said. I checked my watch. "It's 10:59. Her mouth tightened. I stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was Erica. Not the person. Her image. A framed newspaper profile hung beside the staircase. A photograph of Erica receiving a civic award stood on the console table. Harbor Light brochures had been arranged in a silver holder where my mother once kept Christmas cards. My old bedroom was at the end of the second-floor hallway. When I opened the door, I found no bed. The room had become storage for Harbor Light gala decorations, framed photographs, surplus workshop folders, and 3 sealed cartons of Erica's memoir promotional materials. A portrait of Erica rested against the wall where my desk had once stood. Owen stopped beside me. "You okay?" "I'm documenting the room." I took several photographs. Elaine appeared behind us. "You haven't lived here in 16 years. We needed the space." "I didn't ask why you changed it." "Then why are you taking pictures?" "Because some of my property was stored here." Her expression shifted. "This is exactly what I mean. Everything becomes evidence with you, only after people start changing their explanations." Grant brought up a cardboard box labeled Carmel School in his handwriting. The tape had already been cut. I knelt and opened it. Inside were notebooks, graduate school papers, old folders, and 3 journals I had believed were lost during one of my parents' moves. I picked up the first journal and turned through it carefully. Several pages were missing. They had not fallen out. The paper had been cut close to the binding, leaving narrow strips attached to the spine. The second journal had the same damage. I photographed the covers, page sequences, cut edges, and the entries immediately before and after each missing section. The gaps matched dates connected to stories Erica later used. My graduation, the months after I left home, and an argument with Elaine about reading my mail. The journals did not mention room 214. I had never written the number down. That detail still belonged to Erica alone. Elaine crossed her arms. "You used to tear pages out all the time?" "No, I didn't. You may not remember." I looked up at her. "That explanation has become popular in this family." She glanced away first. Grant lifted one of the journals and examined a page near the back. "I wrote this," he said. In the margin was a short note in blue ink. "Ask me before you make assumptions." I remembered the argument that had caused him to write it. He had found the journal open on my desk, read a paragraph, and decided I was criticizing him. His note had been less an apology than an instruction. "That was your handwriting," I said, "which means the journal was still intact when you read it." He nodded slowly. Elaine moved toward the door. "We should go downstairs. This is becoming theatrical." "No," I said. "We're going to the computer." The desktop sat in Grant's study beneath a shelf of tax binders and home repair receipts. The household email account had existed for nearly 20 years. Both my parents used it for bills, family notices, scanned documents, and correspondence with relatives. Grant sat at the desk. Elaine remained standing behind him. "I don't consent to you searching my email," she said. "I'm not touching it," I replied. "Grant has access to the account and found a message sent from it. He is choosing to show me. It is my account too. Then you can remain here and watch." Grant entered the password. The sent folder loaded. He typed the subject line into the search field. "Material you asked for" appeared as the first result. The email had been sent to Erica in March of 2014. It contained one PDF attachment. Grant opened the message. Elaine had written only 2 sentences. "These are the pages you asked for. Change names and dates before you use any of it." The attachment was titled Camille, Materials, PDF. For several seconds, no one spoke. There was no dramatic confession. No explanation about healing, family history, or shared pain. There was only a file with my name on it and an instruction to disguise the source. Grant clicked the attachment. The first pages were scans from my journal. The next document was my therapy letter. The final pages contained my essay, Quiet Houses. Each scan showed the edges of the original paper. One page had the faint coffee ring I remembered from Elaine, setting her mug on my desk. Another contained a correction in my handwriting that had not appeared in the final version I submitted to my professor. These were not similar ideas. They were my pages. I took out my phone. "Before you photograph anything," Grant said, "should we call someone?" It was the first sensible question he had asked since the wedding. Yes. I called Evelyn Park, the civil attorney Owen and I had consulted after the guest portal provider refused to release server details directly. I explained where we were, who owned the account, and who had logged in. Evelyn told Grant to preserve the email in its native format. Take screenshots showing the sender, recipient, date, message body, and attachment name, and avoid forwarding the file until she could advise us on maintaining a clear chain. Grant followed her instructions. Elaine watched him with growing disbelief. "You're helping her build a case against your own daughter." Grant did not turn around. "They're both my daughters. Only one of them has spent years keeping this house afloat." There it was again. The mortgage. Erica had transformed financial help into immunity, and my parents had accepted the exchange. I looked at Elaine. Did Erica ask for specific pages? She wanted examples of family conflict. Did she tell you she planned to present them as her life? She said she was developing composite stories. Then why tell her to change names and dates? Because people deserve privacy. I almost laughed. You protected our privacy by scanning my journal without permission? You had left those boxes here. That did not make the contents yours. You were not using them. The words were nearly identical to Erica's argument. Unused pain, unused writing, unused memories. Anything I chose not to display became available for someone else to claim. Grant completed the screenshots. I asked him to save the original email without changing the file name or folder. Evelyn would arrange a secure copy later. Then I turned back to Elaine. Did you send her anything else? I don't remember. Did you remove pages from the journals? I said I don't remember. Did Erica ask you about room 214? Elaine's eyes narrowed. I had never heard that number until you started accusing everyone. That answer was possible. Unlike the other material, the number had not been in the scans. I did not need Elaine to know it. Erica already did. What about the wedding? I asked. Did you know she still had access to the guest portal? No. Did you help write the messages? No. Did you know the wedding had not been canceled? Elaine hesitated. I received the same notice everyone else did. and then you called the family to confirm it. I believed it. Why didn't you call me? The message told us not to. You have ignored every boundary I've set for 15 years. Her face hardened. You accused me of refusing accountability. You accused your father of standing by while I hurt you. After everything Erica has done for us, I was not going to beg for an invitation. You already had an invitation. You know what I mean. I did. The messages had been designed to give each person a reason not to verify them. Erica had not relied only on technology. She had relied on pride. Grant pushed back from the desk. There's something else, he said. Elaine turned toward him. What? He kept his eyes on the computer screen. I heard Erica tell the motel story before. I waited. At the Harbor Light Gala 2 years ago, he continued. She said she had been thrown out after refusing to give up money for school. And you knew that happened to me? Yes. Did you ask her about it? No. Why? His fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. Elaine said it was a composite. And that was enough? He looked at me then. No. The admission was quiet. I knew it sounded familiar. I chose not to ask. Why? He glanced toward my mother. Elaine answered for him. Because Erica was helping us. Grant closed his eyes briefly. Our adjustable rate changed, he said. The payment went up. Erica covered part of the mortgage for 3 years. How much? About $1,400 a month. That was more than $50,000 over time. It did not excuse him. It did explain the cost of asking questions. If Grant admitted Erica was lying, he risked confronting the person helping preserve his home. So he had treated doubt as uncertainty and uncertainty as permission to remain silent. You didn't stay neutral, I said. You made silence useful to her. I know. No, you know now, because there is an email on the screen. You knew enough then to ask. He nodded. I did not comfort him. An honest admission was not the same as repair. We returned upstairs and packed my journals, school papers, therapy folder, and every document that belonged to me. Owen carried the boxes to the car while I checked the shelves and closet. Elaine followed me from room to room. You are tearing this family apart over stories. No, I'm removing my property from people who used it. Erica has saved lives. Then her work should be able to survive without my biography. You have always resented that people listen to her. I closed the final box. I resent that they think they're listening to her. Grant appeared in the hallway holding his phone. Celia sent me something, he said. Elaine's posture changed. What did she send? An email she wrote to Erica before the wedding. He handed the phone to me. The message had been sent on Wednesday, 2 days before the false cancellation notice. Celia had written that she had received a request from Erica's publisher asking whether the family could confirm parts of Erica's childhood. One section said Erica had been forced out of the house after refusing to surrender money intended for her education. Celia wrote, I may be remembering this incorrectly, but I thought Camille was the one who left after an argument about money. I don't want to give your fact-checker false information. Since we'll all be together at the wedding, I plan to ask Camille, Hannah, and your father what they remember. There was no mention of room 214. Celia had never known the number, but she had known enough to threaten the larger lie. Below her message was a forwarding header. Elaine had sent Celia's email to Erica less than 20 minutes after receiving it. The false cancellation notice had been created the following morning. I looked at my mother. You warned her. Elaine shook her head. I forwarded a family email. You told Erica exactly which people would compare what they knew at my wedding. I did not tell her to cancel anything. That might have been true. Elaine did not have to design the sabotage to make it possible. She had supplied the private material, protected the public story, and warned Erica when the separate witnesses were about to stand in the same room. Grant took the phone back. I didn't know Elaine forwarded it, he said. I believed him. That did not make him innocent of everything else. Owen returned from the car and stopped when he saw my face. What happened? I took a photograph of the forwarding header and sent it to Evelyn. Then I looked around the hallway where I had once measured my height against the doorframe and waited for my parents to tell me I belonged there. Erica didn't empty those tables because she was angry about my wedding, I said. She emptied them because the wedding was going to put every person who knew a piece of the truth in the same room. By the time Owen and I left my parents' house, I no longer believed the empty tables had been the point. They had been the method. The point had been to keep certain people apart long enough for Erica's version of the past to survive another round of scrutiny. I spent the drive home listing the people who had been expected at the wedding. Celia remembered that I had been the daughter forced out after the argument over money. Hannah had the email I sent from a motel the following morning. Grant knew Erica had never been expelled from the house, even if he had chosen not to challenge her story. Elaine knew where Erica's source material had come from. I knew the name of the motel, the room number, and the sentence Erica had repeated on stage. None of us held the entire truth alone. Together, we could have compared enough details to expose the lie before the publisher completed its verification process. That was what Erica had prevented. She had not needed to convince my family that the wedding no longer existed. She only needed to make them angry enough, ashamed enough, or proud enough not to confirm it. When we reached home, I called Celia. "I need every version of the message you can find," I told her, "not just yours." "What do you mean, every version?" "The message you received accused you of staying quiet when my mother hurt me. My father's version accused him of standing beside her. I want to know what everyone else was told." Celia did not defend herself. "I'll ask. Do not tell them Erica sent it. Ask them to forward the original message because the wedding portal is being reviewed." "You think she wrote different messages?" "I think she understood exactly what each person needed to hear in order not to call." Over the next 4 days, Celia collected 3 original message threads. My Uncle Raymond had been told I could no longer tolerate relatives who treated abuse as private family business. His message said that calling me would prove he cared more about appearances than my safety. A cousin who had once borrowed money from my parents was told I resented anyone who continued accepting Elaine's help. She assumed the wedding cancellation was part of a larger financial dispute and stayed away to avoid being pulled into it. My father's message said I refused to begin a marriage, while the man who had watched my mother mistreat me expected the privilege of walking me down the aisle. Each version ended with a variation of the same instruction. Do not call. Do not send anyone to the venue. Do not ask another relative to intervene. I need one day when this family respects a boundary. The messages were not identical, but they had been written to work together. Each recipient was told that the others already knew. By the time anyone considered checking, Elaine had called the closest relatives and confirmed that I had finally cut the family off. The distance helped Erica. Nearly everyone on my side had planned to drive from Raleigh to the Asheville area. It was close to 4 hours under normal conditions. They had reserved hotel rooms, arranged carpools, and planned to arrive Friday evening. The false notice arrived Friday morning. By noon, they had canceled rooms and rides. By evening, they were scattered across different homes, each believing the rest of the family had received the same decision directly from me. They had not been powerless. Any one of them could have called Owen, Hannah, the inn, or a guest outside the family. They chose not to. Erica had designed the trap, but pride had closed it. That distinction mattered to me. I was not going to excuse my relatives simply because they had been manipulated. The lie worked because it told each of them something they were already prepared to believe about me. That I was vindictive. That I used boundaries as punishment. That I would rather destroy an important day than speak plainly. Erica knew our family well enough to turn those assumptions into instructions. The following week, I found a notice on the publisher's website announcing that advance copies of Erica's memoir would be sent to selected reviewers in January. The manuscript was in its final verification stage. Harbor Light had also scheduled a spring training campaign called The Rooms We Survive. The promotional page described Erica's motel story as the foundation of the program. Her lie was no longer contained inside speeches and podcasts. It was being converted into a book, a training product, and a record that other people would cite as fact. Owen read the notice over my shoulder. How long until it becomes harder to stop? It's already harder than it would have been 2 years ago. That wasn't what I asked. I closed the browser. If the publisher signs off on the verification and Harbor Light distributes the program, every correction becomes more complicated. More contracts, more copies, more people repeating it. Then what are you waiting for? I want to give her one opportunity to correct it without forcing me to expose more of my own writing. Owen leaned against the kitchen counter. Do you think she'll take it? No. Then why call? Because I need to know I gave her a choice before I move this outside the family. I had already spoken with Evelyn Park twice. She advised me not to record the call secretly, even though North Carolina law would have allowed a participant to consent on her own behalf. We did not need a recording if the call produced nothing useful, and I did not want the argument to become about how the words were captured. Evelyn joined from her office and identified herself at the beginning. Erica answered immediately. "So now you need an attorney to speak to your own sister?" she asked. "I need a clear record of what I'm requesting." "This is intimidation." "No," Evelyn said. "This is an opportunity to resolve specific concerns before a formal complaint is submitted." Erica went quiet. I kept my list in front of me. "You need to remove the copied passages from the manuscript and Harbor Light materials," I said. "You need to return or destroy the scans Mom sent you. You need to correct the source of the motel story with the publisher and the foundation. You also need to tell the family that I did not cancel my wedding. You're combining unrelated issues. They are connected by the same source. You have no right to control how I describe our childhood. I'm not asking you to stop describing your childhood. I'm asking you to stop using my writing and presenting my experiences as yours. Memory is not property. My letters are." Erica let out a small, tired laugh. "This is what you always do. You reduce everything human to ownership and dates. You signed a grant application calling the motel story your lived experience. You haven't seen any grant application. Then correcting the source should not be difficult." Her silence told me I had touched something she did not expect me to know. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. The warmth was gone. "You left those stories in boxes for years. They were mine to leave there. You did nothing with them. I lived through them. And then what? You hid them because privacy made you feel morally superior." Evelyn started to speak, but I raised a hand even though Erica could not see me. "Are you saying you had the right to use them because I chose not to publish them?" "I am saying pain can either rot in private or become useful." "To whom?" "To women who needed to hear it." "That does not make it yours." "You buried it," she said. I gave it a purpose. The sentence landed with more clarity than a confession. Erica did not believe she had stolen from me. She believed my refusal to commercialize my life had left the material abandoned. In her mind, transforming it into influence had given her a greater claim than surviving it had given me. "Did you use your wedding portal account to send the cancellation messages?" I asked. "I'm not answering accusations created by your need for revenge. Did you send them? This conversation is over. Then I'll submit the complaint." Her voice sharpened. "If you damage Harbor Light, you are not hurting me. You are hurting women who depend on us. Keeping the programs alive is the board's responsibility. Keeping your story intact is not mine. You have no idea what it takes to build something that matters. I know what it takes to build it from your own materials." Erica disconnected. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Evelyn said, "Write down your recollection now, separately from mine." I did. I recorded the time, the participants, and the exact phrases I remembered. Evelyn prepared her own contemporaneous notes. Neither set of notes proved Erica had sent the wedding messages, but the call established that she knew my material had been left in private boxes and believed turning it into public work justified her use. The next step was not a lawsuit. It was a complaint to Harbor Light's board. Evelyn helped me keep the scope narrow. We did not send my full journals. We did not describe every family injury. We did not demand that Erica be fired before anyone reviewed the evidence. The complaint addressed 4 issues. First, Harbor Light materials contained passages substantially similar to my unpublished letter, journal entries, and graduate essay. Second, the motel story had been presented as Erica's lived experience in promotional and commercial materials. Third, a co-host credential registered to Erica had been used to send false cancellation notices and personalized messages through my wedding guest portal. Fourth, records connected to the source and use of those stories needed to be preserved before they could be changed or deleted. We attached only what was necessary. The email Elaine sent with the PDF. Side-by-side comparisons of selected passages. Celia's original wedding messages. The guest portal activity summary. Hannah's 2009 email, confirming that I had been the person staying at a motel after being forced from home. Celia's fact-check email and Elaine's forwarding header, We asked for an independent review and temporary restrictions preventing Erica from altering story source archives while the matter was assessed. We did not ask the board to shut down Harbor Light. I wrote one sentence in the complaint that mattered more to me than the rest. The continued operation of programs serving vulnerable women should not depend on preserving one executive's false account of where her stories came from. We submitted the complaint shortly before Christmas. The board chair acknowledged receipt 2 days later. Her response was formal and cautious. She said the documents appeared to involve serious family disagreement, but did not yet establish that Harbor Light's governance or charitable operations had been compromised. She suggested private mediation. I read the message twice. Owen stood beside me. They're calling it family drama. They're asking for proof that reaches the organization. Don't the training materials do that? They may say Erica believed she had permission to use composite stories. Your mother told her to change names and dates. That proves Mom knew the source. It does not yet prove what Erica told the board. He looked at me. You sound disappointed, but not surprised. I expected them to protect the organization. By protecting her? At first they may think those are the same thing. That evening, Erica posted another video. She said Harbor Light was being threatened by a private individual who wanted to weaponize family pain against an organization serving women in crisis. She promised the foundation would remain focused on healing rather than retaliation. The comments were immediate. People praised her restraint. Several wrote that family members often tried to sabotage survivors once they became successful. I did not respond. The board wanted evidence connected directly to governance. Public anger would not give them that. 3 days later, an email arrived from an address I did not recognize. The sender was Marisol Vega. Her message contained only 4 sentences. My name is Marisol. I used to direct programs and story sourcing at Harbor Light. I left because I was asked to change where one of those stories came from. I kept records because I believed someone might eventually need them. I did not answer Marisol from my personal email. I forwarded her message to Evelyn and waited until the next morning, when Evelyn confirmed that we should communicate through her office. Marisol had been gone from Harbor Light for nearly 2 years, but the records she described could still contain confidential information belonging to the organization or the women it served. I wanted evidence. I did not want another person accused of mishandling private stories because she was trying to help me prove mine had been taken. Evelyn arranged a video meeting for the following Tuesday. Marisol joined from a small home office with a blank wall behind her. She wore glasses and kept looking toward a folder beside her laptop. I need to be clear before we begin, she said. I don't have the entire foundation archive. I never copied client files, donor lists, or anything belonging to program participants. That's not what we're asking for, Evelyn replied. I kept documents connected to my own work and the concerns I raised before I resigned. Marisol looked at me. I saw your wedding photo online, she said. Then I saw Erica's video about a family member trying to destroy Harbor Light. I recognized the pattern. What pattern? Whenever someone questioned the source of a story, she reframed the question as an attack on the mission. Marisol had joined Harbor Light in 2020, a year after Erica founded it. At first, the organization had been small enough that staff shared responsibilities. Marisol developed workshops, reviewed training material, and helped speakers prepare personal narratives without exposing information that could identify clients. As we grew, donors wanted more founder stories, she explained. They wanted to understand why Erica had created the organization. Her personal history became part of almost every major proposal. Did she tell you those stories were composites? I asked. Sometimes. The answer was not what I expected. Marisol continued before I could respond. She used the word composite whenever details conflicted. But in speeches, grant applications, and donor meetings, she often described the same events as things she personally survived. The label changed depending on what was useful. She opened the folder. The motel story was one of them. Evelyn asked Marisol to describe each document before sharing it. The first was a copy of a grant application submitted to a regional family services foundation in 2023. The application requested funding for a training program called Rooms of Safety. The grant had later been renewed and expanded. Near the beginning was a section titled Founders' Lived Experience. Marisol shared her screen. I read Erica's words, slowly. At 17, I was forced from my family home after refusing to surrender the money intended for my education. I spent the night alone in room 214 of a roadside motel, where I learned that safety begins when we stop asking harmful people to keep a place for us. The application did not call the story a composite. It did not say it had been adapted from a family member's experience. Erica had signed a certification beneath it, confirming that the statements were accurate to the best of her knowledge. How much funding did that application receive? I asked. The first award was $240,000 over 2 years, Marisol said. The motel story wasn't the only reason they funded us, but it was central to the founder narrative. The money had supported legitimate services, staff salaries, temporary housing partnerships, training materials, a hotline expansion. I did not want those programs harmed. That did not make the application honest. Did you ever ask her about the source? I said. Marisol opened another file. It was a memorandum she had written after a content review meeting in May 2023. The memo was addressed to herself and stored with her professional notes. It summarized a concern she had raised about the motel story. In an earlier draft, a source note beside the narrative read older sister's account. The note disappeared from the final training version. I asked Erica why the older sister was mentioned, Marisol said. She told me family experiences were blended and that strict source labels could interfere with emotional truth. Did she say the sister had given permission? No. Did you ask? Yes. Marisol scrolled farther down the memo. Her own words read, requested written consent or documentation authorizing use. Erica stated that the material came from family history and did not require individual attribution. That was not a confession. It was better in one way because it had been recorded before my complaint, before the wedding, and before Marisol had any reason to know I would challenge Erica. I told her the language in the grant was different from the language in the workshop notes, Marisol said. If it was a composite, the application should not call it her lived experience. What happened? She told me not to become so attached to technical distinctions that I lost sight of the women we were helping. The phrasing sounded familiar. Technical accuracy, emotional truth, healing versus ownership. Erica had been rehearsing that defense for years. Marisol stayed at Harbor Light for another 8 months. During that time, she began keeping contemporaneous notes whenever source descriptions changed. She did not have a document in which Erica wrote, "I stole my sister's story." Real people rarely created evidence that neatly. What Marisol had was a pattern of questions being raised, source labels disappearing, and Erica insisting that the Foundation's mission justified flexibility. Why did you leave? I asked. The final issue involved a different story. Not yours. A former participant recognized parts of her experience in a paid workshop and asked who had authorized it. Erica wanted me to revise the source record so it looked as though consent had existed from the beginning. Did you do it? No. What happened after that? My responsibilities changed. I was excluded from meetings. Then I was offered a separation agreement. Did you sign one? Yes. It prevents me from disclosing certain internal information, but it does not require me to conceal unlawful conduct or respond falsely to an investigator. Evelyn will need to review it before I provide anything else. Evelyn nodded. That is exactly what we'll do. Marisol did not become my rescuer that day. She became a witness with a narrow set of records and first-hand knowledge of how Erica handled source concerns. That was enough to move the case forward. Evelyn prepared a supplemental submission to Harbor Light's board. It included the grant application, Marisol's contemporaneous memo, and a request that outside counsel contact her directly. We also received an update from the wedding portal provider. The server records had been preserved. The provider still would not release full technical data to me. Their legal department said detailed access information could be supplied to an authorized investigator or through appropriate legal process. They did confirm several facts in writing. The co-host credential, assigned to Erica, had accessed the foster family segment. That credential had created the cancellation notice. It had sent the personalized relay messages. There had been no password reset, recovery request, or newly created co-host account during the relevant period. The record did not prove Erica's fingers had touched the keyboard. It did show that someone using her established access had selected only my family, used information connected to her, and sent messages designed around conflicts she knew intimately. Combined with room 214, the explanation of an unknown hacker became less plausible. Combined with Erica's refusal to answer who knew the number, it became weaker still. Evelyn sent the provider confirmation with our supplemental documents. The board responded 6 days later. This time, the tone had changed. The chair informed us that Harbor Light had retained an outside investigator to review the sourcing, use, and modification of founder narratives in official materials. The review would also examine whether organizational systems or personnel had been used to retaliate against a complainant. The message explained the structure of the foundation in plain terms. Harbor Light had 7 independent voting directors. Erica was the founder and executive director, but she was not a voting member of the board. Under the bylaws, the directors could restrict her system access, place her on paid administrative leave, or terminate her employment for cause after an investigation and an opportunity to respond. They were not suspending her yet. They were beginning with preservation and access controls. Erica would no longer be permitted to edit StorySource archives without a second authorized staff member. Relevant folders would be copied to a restricted repository. The board asked that neither side contact employees directly about the investigation. Camille Foster was no longer being treated as an angry sister bringing family drama into a nonprofit. I was now the complainant in a governance review. That shift did not feel like victory. It felt like the first time someone with authority had agreed to examine the same records Erica had controlled. The investigator interviewed me the following week. Her name was Denise Holloway. She had spent 15 years handling nonprofit governance and workplace investigations. She did not flatter me or tell me she believed everything. She asked precise questions. Who created each document? Who possessed the originals? Which events could be corroborated by independent records? Which statements were my interpretation rather than observable facts? I appreciated the distinctions. I provided numbered copies of only the pages relevant to the complaint. I did not surrender my complete journals. The originals remained secured, and Evelyn maintained a log of every copy shared. Denise asked whether I wanted Erica removed from Harbor Light. I want her separated from any system she can alter while this is reviewed, I said. The final employment decision belongs to the board. What outcome are you seeking? Stop using my writing, correct the source, preserve the records. Do not use the women Harbor Light serves as a reason to ignore what its executive director did. Do you want a public apology? No. Compensation? For any identifiable commercial use of my written material, that can be discussed later. It is not why I filed the complaint. She watched me for a moment. You understand this process may not resolve the history between you and your family. I'm not asking it to. That answer surprised her less than it would have surprised Elaine. The investigator then obtained the portal server records through the process arranged with the provider and Harbor Light's counsel. I did not receive the raw data. Evelyn received a summary of findings relevant to my complaint. The access had occurred through Erica's co-host credential from a device and network previously associated with her account activity. It still did not place her alone in front of the screen. It placed the action inside her normal access environment. The wording, timing, room 214, and targeted family segment supplied the rest of the context. Erica was interviewed the following day. I was not present. I did not know what she said until the investigator later summarized her position. She denied sending the wedding messages and maintained that the stories used by Harbor Light represented blended family experiences. She claimed she had believed Elaine's permission was sufficient because Elaine had preserved the documents as part of the family's history. That explanation did not address why she had presented the motel story as her lived experience. It also did not explain what the investigator found in Harbor Light's version history. 3 days after my complaint was acknowledged, someone using Erica's administrator account edited the grant archive. The phrase, "my lived experience," became a composite account reflecting patterns common to many survivors. The edit was not hidden. It carried a timestamp. It appeared after Erica knew the description was being challenged. When asked about it, Erica said she had been clarifying language to prevent misunderstanding. The investigator then found a second action from the same account. An archived audio file from the 2023 donor presentation had been marked for deletion. That recording contained Erica introducing room 214 as the night she personally became homeless. The file had disappeared from the active media folder. For a few hours, Erica may have believed it was gone. Harbor Light's retention policy automatically copied deleted media into a restricted backup maintained by its outside technology vendor. Ordinary administrators could not erase that backup. The investigator recovered the audio. Evelyn called me after receiving the update. "The board has more than a sourcing dispute now," she said. She tried to remove the recording. The account associated with her tried. She will have an opportunity to explain it. What explanation could there be? That is not our job to invent. I stood at the window in my office, looking down at students crossing the winter courtyard with their coats pulled tight around them. For years, Erica had survived by changing labels. My experience became family history. My writing became source material. A personal claim became a composite when someone finally asked where it came from. She had assumed that if the current version looked clean, no one would examine the one beneath it. That assumption worked only when no one preserved the older record. This time, the deleted file was still waiting in the backup. The recovered audio changed the investigation from a dispute over storytelling into a question of what Erica had tried to remove after she knew someone was looking. Evelyn expanded the preservation letter the next morning. Harbor Light, the publisher, the wedding portal provider, and Erica's counsel were instructed to preserve emails, drafts, source notes, archived media, access logs, internal messages, and any records connected to room 214 or the material Elaine had sent from the household account. The letter did not accuse every employee of wrongdoing. It did not demand that Harbor Light stop serving anyone. It simply made deletion harder to explain as an accident. I placed my original journals, the therapy letter, the motel key sleeve, and the printed copy of Quiet Houses in a safe deposit box. Evelyn kept numbered digital copies of the pages relevant to the complaint. Hannah retained the original 2009 email in her account, and Grant preserved the household message exactly where it had been found. For the first time, the evidence existed in places Erica could not reach. That did not stop Elaine from trying to reach me. She arrived at the library on a Thursday afternoon without calling. I was finishing a consultation with a history professor when I saw her through the glass wall of my office. She stood near the circulation desk, wearing a camel coat, and the expression she used whenever she believed she had been forced into an unpleasant action by someone else's behavior. My supervisor came to the doorway. "There's a woman asking for you," she said. "She says she's your mother." "I know who she is." "Do you want security?" "Not yet. I'll speak to her in the public seating area." I took my phone and left my office, closing the door behind me. Elaine did not hug me. "You won't answer," she said. "I told you to communicate by email. I am not discussing my daughters through attorneys and computer messages. You came to my workplace because you have turned this into an investigation. You helped turn it into one when you sent Erica my writing." Her eyes moved toward the students seated nearby. "Lower your voice. I'm speaking normally." She sat in a chair near the windows. I remained standing until she gestured impatiently toward the seat across from her. "Your father told me about the deleted recording," she said. "Grant should not be discussing the investigation with you. He is my husband. That does not make him part of Erica's defense." Elaine gripped the strap of her handbag. "Erica did not steal from you. She used what I gave her." The sentence came so easily that I almost missed what it contained. "What you gave her was mine. It was in my house. So were my clothes. That didn't make them yours to sell." She changed the details. "Not enough to stop presenting my life as hers." Elaine leaned closer. "You are destroying a career that has helped thousands of women because you cannot tolerate that your sister found a purpose you never did." "I found a purpose. It just didn't require an audience." Her expression hardened. "This family will never recover from what you're doing. You said that when I refused to give Erica my college money. That was different. It was the same rule. Whatever belonged to me became selfish the moment Erica wanted it." A student passed behind us, and Elaine waited until she was gone. "Grant is not sleeping," she said. "The mortgage is still there. If Erica loses her salary, she cannot continue helping us. That is between the three of you. Harbor Light may lose funding. That is the board's responsibility. Women may lose services. That is also the board's responsibility. You have an answer for everything." "No, I have a boundary for this." She stared at me as though the word itself were an insult. "I want all future contact in writing," I said. "Do not come to my workplace again. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you what will happen. If you return uninvited, I will ask campus security to remove you. Her face changed then. Not into fear, but disbelief. Elaine had spent most of my life assuming consequences were cruelty when they applied to her. She stood. You have become exactly the person Erica said you were. I did not ask what that meant. I watched her leave, then returned to my office and wrote a factual account of the conversation while the wording was fresh. I sent it to Evelyn and my supervisor. The library documented Elaine's visit in case she returned. 2 days later, Erica's attorney sent a settlement proposal. It arrived before the investigator had completed her report. The offer sounded generous until I reached the conditions. Erica would remove selected passages from future editions of the memoir. Harbor Light would revise its materials to describe all founder stories as composites. I would receive $25,000 and a ceremonial position on a new ethics advisory council. In exchange, I would withdraw my complaint, agree that Erica had not acted intentionally, and state that the dispute resulted from differing family memories. Owen read the proposal beside me at our dining table. They're offering to pay you to say she misunderstood. They're offering to pay me to rewrite the source after she got caught. $25,000 is not nothing. No. I looked at the paragraph requiring me to acknowledge the stories as shared family material. That's why it's supposed to be tempting. Evelyn asked whether I wanted to make a counteroffer. I want the investigation to continue. You understand, a later settlement may not include a payment like this. I understand. What terms would matter if they return? No use of my letters, journals, essays, name, or room 214, a correction to the publisher and the board, no retaliation, no ceremonial role. And compensation? For identifiable commercial use and reasonable legal costs. Not for silence. Evelyn rejected the proposal that afternoon. Grant called the following week and asked to meet. I chose a cafe halfway between Raleigh and our home. Owen offered to come, but I went alone. By then, I had learned that accepting help did not mean I needed a witness at every table. Grant was already seated when I arrived. A closed folder rested beside his coffee. He looked thinner. Your mother told me you threatened to have her arrested at the library, he said. I told her security would remove her if she returned uninvited. He nodded slowly. That sounds more likely. I sat across from him. What did you bring? He opened the folder. Inside was a draft declaration Evelyn had prepared. It stated that in September 2009, I had been forced from the family home after refusing to transfer money from an account belonging to me. It confirmed that Erica had not been expelled, had not lived at a motel, and had not owned the funds described in the Harbor Light narrative. Grant had also included the mortgage records. Erica had paid approximately $1,400 a month toward my parents' housing costs for 3 years. I told myself it was gratitude, he said, that she was helping because we supported the foundation. Did she ever ask you to defend her stories? Not directly. What did she ask? She asked me not to undermine work I didn't understand. And you agreed? Yes. He looked toward the window. When I heard her tell the motel story, I knew parts belonged to you. Elaine said Erica had blended several experiences. I decided that was enough, because asking more questions could have changed everything. It could have changed your mortgage payment. He did not deny it. I let financial help decide what I was willing to notice. That was the most honest thing he had said to me. It was not an apology large enough to repair 16 years. It was a fact he was finally willing to place under his own name. The declaration has to be accurate, I said. Not protective of me, not punitive toward Erica. I know. You'll sign under penalty of perjury. I know that too. He had chosen a declaration rather than an affidavit because Evelyn needed a signed statement for the investigator, not a notarized performance of regret. Grant signed it 2 days later. Elaine called his decision betrayal. I called it late. Late did not mean useless. The retaliation began the following Monday. A reporter from a regional magazine emailed Evelyn with questions about my mental health. Attached was an image of a journal page I had written during one of the worst months of my 20s. The page contained no threat, diagnosis, or confession. It described feeling trapped between anger and exhaustion after leaving my parents' home, removed from context. It could be presented as evidence that I had always been unstable, obsessive, or unreliable. The reporter wrote that a source close to Harbor Light had provided the page as proof that my claims came from a long-standing fixation on Erica. My hands shook when I first saw it, not because the page disproved anything, because Erica had reached into another private moment and handed it to a stranger. Evelyn told the reporter the document was disputed private material obtained without my permission and connected to an active governance investigation. She provided enough source information to establish risk without sending the rest of my journal. The reporter agreed to delay publication. Then we examined the image. The top edge showed a faint crop line created when Elaine scanned the page. In the lower corner was a small batch number added by the desktop software that had created Camille Materials PDF. The number matched the PDF sent to Erica in 2014. Some metadata remained, but Evelyn warned me not to depend on it. Files could be copied, stripped, or altered. The crop pattern, batch number, source email, and limited chain of access were stronger together. Only 3 known parties had possessed that specific scan: Elaine, Erika, and the investigator, whose copy carried a different evidence stamp. Elaine denied speaking to the reporter. Erica's attorney said she had no knowledge of the leak. The denial might have protected her if the leak had been the only problem. It was not. The investigator had also obtained the recovered donor audio, the version history showing Erica's post-complaint edit, the portal server records, Marisol's memorandum, Grant's declaration, and the email in which Elaine told Erica to change names and dates. The investigator informed Harbor Light's board that the evidence supported 4 immediate concerns. Official materials had presented a disputed family experience as Erica's own. The source description had been changed after the complaint. An archived recording had been marked for deletion. Private material connected to the complainant had been supplied to the press during the review. The board met in an emergency session. Because Erica was not a voting director, she could not block the decision. Under the bylaws, the 7 independent members voted to place her on paid administrative leave while the final report was completed. Her access to Harbor Light email, cloud storage, donor systems, and public accounts was revoked. The spring gala was postponed. An interim executive director was appointed from the existing leadership team. The announcement was brief. It did not name me or describe the evidence. It said only that the executive director had been placed on leave during an independent governance review and that services would continue without interruption. Erica sent me a message from her personal number 20 minutes later. "You think documents make you untouchable? If you keep pushing, I'll make sure everyone hears what you really wrote about yourself." I did not answer. I forwarded the message to Evelyn and the investigator, then saved the original with its timestamp. By evening, Erica's counsel claimed she had sent it while emotionally distressed and had not intended it as a threat. The investigator added it to the retaliation record. The next morning, Evelyn called while I was unlocking my office. "The publisher has frozen the manuscript," she said. "For how long?" "Until they finish a rights and accuracy review." I turned on the archive room lights. Rows of labeled boxes appeared behind the glass, each one preserved because someone had understood that later questions depended on earlier records. Erica had spent years believing she could change the label and make the original disappear. Now, Harbor Light had removed her access. The publisher had stopped the book, and the message she sent to frighten me had become one more document she could no longer take back. The publisher's decision to freeze Erica's manuscript did not mean I had won anything. It meant the book would not move forward until someone examined who had written the disputed passages, whether Erica had the right to use them, and whether the personal history she sold as her own could survive verification. That distinction mattered. So did another one, Evelyn explained when Owen and I met her at her office the following afternoon. "You cannot own a memory in the same way you own a letter you wrote," she said. "Two relatives can describe the same argument differently. The law is not going to decide which person has exclusive rights to remember a motel." "I understand. But your journal entries, therapy letter, and essay are written works. If substantial portions were copied, that is different." The private scans Elaine gave Erica raise additional issues. So do statements in contracts and grant materials claiming the experiences were Erica's. What about room 214? The number itself is not copyrighted. I looked down at the notes in front of me. That sounds absurd when the number is the reason I knew she was involved. "It is powerful evidence," Evelyn said. "It is not automatic ownership. Owen shifted beside me. So Erica can keep telling the story? She can describe events she actually witnessed. She can discuss her family. She cannot safely publish Camille's written language as her own, falsely certify experiences in official documents, or ignore a valid agreement restricting her future use. What agreement? I asked. A settlement, if we eventually negotiate one. Contractual restrictions can be broader than the rights a judge might impose after litigation. I had spent years assuming that protecting my privacy meant keeping everything outside a legal file. Now, I was learning that the widest possible fight could expose more than it protected. A public lawsuit might require depositions, exhibits, competing narratives, and arguments over every line. Even if I won, pages I had never intended to share could become easier for strangers to access. What is the narrowest useful action? I asked. Evelyn turned one page toward me. We identify the exact text you wrote. We show where it appears in the manuscript and paid materials. We notify the publisher that rights were not cleared. We preserve the evidence of misrepresentation and retaliation. We ask for correction, removal, and restrictions on future use. And damages? They can be discussed later. I would not build your strategy around a dramatic number. I don't want a dramatic number. I know. That is why we can keep the request focused. Owen looked at me. You're sure you don't want to pursue everything? I want control of what is mine. I don't want to spend the next 3 years arguing in public over every bad thing that happened in that house. That was not surrender. It was the first decision in the process that felt entirely separate from Erica. I was not choosing the punishment that would frighten her most. I was choosing the outcome that would protect me best. Evelyn sent the publisher a side-by-side comparison package. On the left were selected lines from my original documents, each marked with its date and source. On the right were passages from Erica's manuscript proposal, workshop materials, and archived speeches. We did not send my complete journals. We sent only the pages necessary to establish the comparison, with evidence numbers and a record of who received each copy. One passage from Quiet Houses had been altered in 5 places, but kept the same uncommon metaphor and sentence structure. A paragraph from my therapy letter appeared in Erica's manuscript, with the pronouns changed. The story of my graduation had been rewritten, but one line, describing the sound of folding chairs being stacked behind an empty family section, remained almost word for word. The publisher's legal department acknowledged receipt within 2 days. Their contract with Erica required her to warrant that she had the right to use submitted material. It also required disclosure, when real people could be identified, or when another person's writing had been incorporated. They did not cancel the book immediately. They began a rights and accuracy review. Erica's attorney accused us of trying to turn family language into private property. The publisher did not respond to that argument publicly. They requested Erica's source records, draft history, consent documentation, and explanations for the passages Evelyn had identified. For the first time, Erica had to answer people who were not financially or emotionally dependent on believing her. Denise Holloway interviewed me again during the second week of April. The meeting lasted nearly 3 hours. She asked what result I wanted from Harbor Light, now that Erica had been placed on leave. I want my documents removed from every active program, I said. I want the source corrected in any record that called my experience hers. I want all remaining files preserved until the review ends. Do you want the board to terminate her? I want them to act on the findings. The employment decision is theirs. Would you accept Erica returning in a different role? No role that gives her access to source material, client stories, or public representation. That is effectively no meaningful role. That may be the consequence of what she did. Denise made a note. What about the people Harbor Light serves? The program should continue. Would you consider helping the board rebuild its story consent process? No. She looked up. Why not? Because I filed a complaint. I did not volunteer to repair the organization that ignored it. That answer seemed to interest her. I continued before she could ask another question. Keeping the programs alive is the board's responsibility. Keeping Erica's lie alive is not mine. I had said something similar to my sister weeks earlier. This time, I understood the full boundary inside it. I cared whether women lost access to shelter referrals, counseling support, or emergency resources. I did not have to become Harbor Light's unpaid conscience to prove that care. Denise also asked whether I wanted a public correction. Yes, but limited. What should it say? That materials attributed to Erica included personal writings and experiences that were not hers to use. It does not need to summarize my journals or identify every family event. Do you want your name included? Only where necessary to correct records already connected to me. The investigator closed one folder and opened another. Erica says you are trying to erase her right to speak about her childhood. She can speak about her childhood. She says your experiences overlapped. Some did. She says your mother authorized the use. My mother did not own my writing. She says the nonprofit's mission transformed the context. A mission changes the audience. It does not change the author. Denise watched me for a moment, then moved to the next question. I left the interview tired, but not exposed. I had not given her my entire life. I had given her enough to make a decision. 3 days later, Harbor Lights Board issued a public statement. It was less than 200 words. The statement confirmed that Erica remained on paid administrative leave during an independent review. It said the annual spring gala had been postponed and that Harbor Lights programs would continue under the interim executive director. It did not name me. It did not describe room 214. It did not mention my journals, my mother, or the wedding. Most importantly, it stated that Erica was not authorized to speak on behalf of Harbor Light while the review continued. Erica responded less than an hour later from her personal account. She said a board could suspend a title but could not suspend a founder's truth. The video had been recorded in Elaine's living room. I recognized the cream curtains and the edge of the framed newspaper profile near the staircase. Erica told her followers she had remained silent out of respect for the investigation, but that silence was now being used against her. She announced a live event called Who Owns a Survivor's Story? The title alone told me she intended to blur every distinction Evelyn had explained. Erica was not going to defend the copying line by line. She was going to ask an audience whether my insistence on consent was an attack on survivors. The live stream would be held at a privately rented event studio. Erica invited supporters, former donors, journalists, and women who said Harbor Light had changed their lives. Her attorney advised her not to proceed. I knew that because her attorney sent Evelyn a written notice stating that the event was being organized against counsel's recommendation and without Harbor Light's approval. Erica did not cancel it. She posted a photograph of herself holding a folder beneath the caption, "Some people hide behind documents. I am ready to tell the truth inside them." Owen saw it before I did. He placed his phone face down on the kitchen counter. "She wants you there." "Yes." "Are you going?" "No." He studied my face as if he expected a second answer. "I thought you might say you needed to confront her. That is what she needs." Hannah arrived that evening, carrying dinner and a bag containing 3 different kinds of cookies. She read Erica's invitation while standing in our kitchen. "She tagged you without using your name," she said. "I noticed. There are reporters asking whether you'll attend. Evelyn will say I'm cooperating with the independent review and won't participate in a private publicity event." Hannah lowered the phone. "Does not going make it look like you're afraid?" "To people who already decided I'm afraid, yes." "And you're okay with that?" "I don't need to win her room." The words surprised me as I said them. For years, Erica's strength had been choosing the setting: a therapy fundraiser, a podcast interview, a family dinner where Elaine controlled the invitation list, a wedding portal where she could divide people before they compared messages. The live stream was another room she had arranged. She would control the lighting, the guest list, the opening statement, and the emotional vocabulary. If I entered, she could turn the dispute into 2 sisters arguing over childhood. If I stayed away, she would have to answer the documents without making my face part of the spectacle. Erica sent me a direct invitation that night. "Come and say it in front of the people you're willing to hurt." I forwarded it to Evelyn and Denise. I did not reply. The next morning, another message arrived. "If you refuse to face me, everyone will know this was never about truth." I forwarded that too. By then, every attempt to pull me into direct conflict had become part of the record showing that Erica would not respect the investigation's boundaries. The publisher contacted Evelyn on the day before the live stream. Their review had identified multiple passages that were not merely similar in subject. They were substantially close to my original language. Some had been copied from the PDF Elaine sent. Others came from quiet houses. A few passages appeared in earlier manuscript drafts before being softened in later versions. The publisher requested additional time before deciding whether to terminate the contract. They also instructed Erica not to read or distribute disputed pages publicly while the rights review remained active. Evelyn relayed that warning to Erica's attorney. The attorney confirmed receipt. That should have ended the possibility that Erica would bring my private writing onto a stage. It did not end my fear that she might do it anyway. The afternoon of the live stream, I went to work as usual. I processed a collection until 5, answered 2 student questions, and sent my supervisor the final inventory for a donated faculty archive. When I reached home, Hannah was already there. Owen had ordered food none of us touched. We connected the television to a laptop 15 minutes before the event began. Evelyn watched from her office. She told me not to comment, call, or respond publicly, no matter what Erica said. I know, I told her. I'm saying it because she may disclose something painful. I still won't respond. You can stop watching. I know that too. The livestream page showed more than 12,000 people waiting. Comments moved too quickly to read. Some called Erica brave. Some demanded that Harbor Light explain the suspension. Others asked why a founder who preached consent was accused of using another woman's private journal. At exactly 7, the screen changed. Erica walked onto a small stage beneath a blue light. Elaine sat in the front row. Several women stood and applauded, while others remained seated with their phones raised. There was no Harbor Light logo behind Erica. The board had denied her permission to use it. She wore a dark suit and carried a thick folder against her chest. I recognized the colored tabs. They matched the copies Elaine had scanned from my papers. Erica placed the folder on a lectern and looked directly into the camera. For months, she began, I have been accused by a woman who wants to silence me because she cannot control what my survival reveals about her. Owen reached for my hand. Hannah sat on my other side, perfectly still. Erica opened the folder. Tonight, she said, I'm going to tell you the truth about the woman trying to take my voice away. Erica stood behind the lectern with my pages in her hands and called herself the person being silenced. I watched from my living room with Owen on one side of me and Hannah on the other. Evelyn had the live stream open from her office. She had instructed me not to comment, call in, or respond publicly, regardless of what Erica said. I had already agreed. That did not make hearing it easier. For years, Erica continued, I protected someone who resented every step I took toward healing. I changed names. I softened details. I carried shame that was never mine because I believed family privacy mattered. The audience in the rented studio remained quiet. There were perhaps 80 people in the room. Some wore Harbor Light pins, although the organization had forbidden Erica from using its logo. Several women in the front rows nodded as she spoke. Others held phones toward the stage. Elaine sat closest to the lectern. My mother's posture was rigid, her chin raised as though she had arrived to witness a vindication rather than a publicity event organized against legal advice. Erica rested one hand on the folder. The woman attacking me now has always believed that if she documents something first, she owns the truth. Owen's fingers tightened around mine. She is describing your job like it's a disorder, he said. I know. Hannah leaned forward. Can the publisher stop her from reading those pages? They warned her not to distribute disputed material. That wasn't my question. No, I said. They cannot physically take the folder out of her hands from another city. On screen, Erica told the audience that families did not experience pain in neat, separate compartments. She said sisters carried each other's memories, parents passed down wounds, and survivors often recognized themselves in stories that belonged to an entire household. That part contained enough truth to make the lie sound reasonable. Families did share events. 2 children could leave the same dinner with different memories. A younger sister could be hurt by watching her older sister expelled from the house. None of that turned the older sister's journal into community property. Erica moved toward the argument she had prepared. This was never theft, she said. It was transformation. A few people applauded. She smiled, encouraged by the sound. The comments beside the live stream moved too quickly to follow, but Hannah read several aloud. One person wrote that Erica had saved her life. Another asked why the board would suspend a founder over a family disagreement. Someone else posted a link to Harbor Light's statement. The board had released an update 12 minutes after the live stream began. Evelyn sent it to us. I opened the document on my phone while Erica continued speaking. The statement said the independent investigation had substantiated concerns in 3 areas: inaccurate representation of source material, alteration or attempted removal of records after a complaint, and retaliation against the complainant. It said the board had begun the process of reviewing Erica's employment for possible termination under the organization's bylaws. It did not identify me. It did not mention Room 214. It did not release a single page of my writing. The board had done exactly what it should have done. It described the governance findings without turning my private history into evidence for public consumption. A reporter in the studio raised her hand. Erica had apparently planned to take questions after her opening statement. But the board's update changed the room before she reached that part. The event moderator approached the microphone. "We'll hold questions until Miss Foster finishes." The reporter did not lower her hand. Erica glanced toward someone off camera, then returned to her prepared remarks. "The board's statement is one side of a private conflict," she said. "I have not been allowed to tell mine." That was false. The investigator had interviewed her more than once. Her attorney had submitted a written response. She had been given access to the allegations and an opportunity to explain the records. What Erica meant was that she had not been allowed to tell her side in the only format she trusted, one where the audience reacted before anyone checked the source. She opened the folder. The first page was not one of my journal entries. It was a printed photograph of us as children. Erica held it toward the camera. We were standing beside a lake at a family picnic. I was 11, she was 6. My hand rested on her shoulder, and she was leaning toward me with both front teeth missing. This was my sister and me before she decided love was something she could withdraw whenever I disappointed her. I remembered the photograph differently. Erica had refused to stand still until I promised she could hold my bracelet after the picture. She had leaned toward me because the doc frightened her. The photograph proved only that we had once been children in the same place. Erica used it as though it documented an entire relationship. She showed 2 more family photographs, then described growing up beneath an older sister who was praised for intelligence while she was treated as fragile. That part may have been true for her. I had been called responsible. Erica had been called sensitive. Neither label had protected either of us from Elaine's control. But Erica did not stop with her own feelings. She returned to the motel story. When I was 17, I experienced a family rupture that shaped every decision I made afterward. She did not say she had been expelled. Not directly. The language had already shifted since the grant application. I spent a night confronting what it meant to have no emotional home. Years later, I used that experience to create resources for women who had been rejected by their families. The same reporter raised her hand again. This time, another person joined her. Erica paused. The moderator approached the lectern and whispered something. Erica nodded. "We can take a few questions." The first reporter stood. "My name is Dana Price with the Carolina Ledger. Harbor Lights Board says the investigation substantiated inaccurate representation of source material. Did the events in room 214 happen to you personally?" The studio became quiet. Erica's face did not change immediately. Room 214 represents a period of rejection that affected everyone in my family. That wasn't my question. Survivor narratives are not courtroom transcripts. Did you personally stay in that motel room? Elaine shifted in her chair. Erica's fingers pressed against the folder. I have always said that the story reflects blended family experiences. The reporter looked down at her notes. The 2023 grant application identifies it as your lived experience and states that you were forced from your home at 17. The board says that description was changed to composite account after the complaint was filed. Why was it changed? Erica looked toward the moderator. That grant funded services for women in crisis. Reducing its impact to one wording change is irresponsible. No one asked about the impact of the program. I asked why the description changed. A woman in the front row called out that the reporter was harassing a survivor. Several people applauded. Others remained silent. Erica raised one hand. "This is exactly the problem," she said. "We are allowing technical language to become more important than the people helped by the work." I felt something inside me settle. It was the same answer she had given Marisol. The same answer she had given me. The same logic Elaine had used when she sent my pages. If the outcome was good enough, then no one was allowed to question the method. Another reporter stood. Did Camille Foster give permission for her private writing to be used? My name entered the room for the first time. Erica had not spoken it. The reporters had connected the complaint to me through public records, family posts, or people close to the investigation. I had known that was possible. I had still chosen not to attend. Erica looked directly into the camera. My sister left those materials in our family home for years. Hannah muttered something under her breath. The reporter continued. Did she give permission? Families do not usually request legal releases before discussing shared history. The disputed passages include language from her unpublished essay and therapy letter. Did she authorize you to use those words? Erica's expression tightened. She was not using them. The room changed. Not dramatically. No one gasped. No one stood and denounced her. But the applause stopped. The reporter asked, "What does that have to do with consent?" Erica leaned toward the microphone. Pain does not become sacred because someone locks it in a box. I heard Owen inhale beside me. Erica continued. My sister had years to speak. She chose silence. I took what our family survived and created something that helped people. The moderator shifted closer to her. Another reporter asked, "Are you saying unused private writing can be taken without permission if someone believes the result is beneficial? That is a deliberately hostile interpretation. What is the correct interpretation?" Erica looked toward the front row, toward Elaine, toward the people who had applauded her opening. Then she said the thing no attorney would have advised her to say. The meaning a story creates can matter more than which person first experienced every detail. No one interrupted her. She had finally stated the belief beneath every choice. I had lived the night. I had written the words. Elaine had preserved the pages. Erica had given them an audience. In her mind, the audience completed a transfer of ownership. Dana Price asked, "Then why change the grant record after your sister complained?" I clarified it. Why was an audio file marked for deletion? I did not personally delete anything. Why was a page from your sister's journal sent to a reporter during the investigation? I have no knowledge of that. That answer came faster. It was the only part of the exchange where Erica sounded prepared. Someone in the audience shouted that the press had already decided she was guilty. A former Harbor Light volunteer stood and said the services mattered more than a dispute over wording. Another woman rose 2 rows behind her. My story was used in a workshop, she said. I signed a release. Why didn't the founder follow the same rule? The first volunteer turned toward her. That is not the same thing. Why not? The moderator asked both women to sit. The room did not unite against Erica. It divided. That was more damaging. As long as everyone applauded, Erica could treat support as proof. Questions required answers. Erica returned to the folder. I came prepared to show you who my sister really is. She lifted the first tabbed page. Evelyn's voice came through my phone. She has been warned. I know. If she reads it, we document it. You do not respond. I know. Erica looked down at the page. This is something Camille wrote during a period when she later claimed our family had abandoned her. Before she could begin, a man in a dark suit stepped onto the stage from the side. I recognized him from earlier photographs as Erica's attorney. He placed one hand over the microphone and spoke to her without facing the audience. Erica pulled the page back. The moderator joined them. The live stream audio did not capture every word, but one sentence from the attorney carried clearly. You have received written notice not to publish disputed material. Erica stared at him. This is my event. This is your liability. A murmur moved through the room. Elaine stood. My daughter has a right to defend herself. The attorney turned toward her. Mrs. Foster, please sit down. Camille has spent her entire life punishing this family. She abandoned us. And now she wants to destroy the daughter who stayed. The camera shifted toward Elaine. She seemed to realize too late that the microphone had captured her. One reporter asked, Did you send Camille's journal pages to Erica? Elaine's mouth opened. The attorney stepped between the microphone and the front row. This event is over. Erica grabbed the microphone stand. No, I am not going to be silenced in a room I paid for. You were advised not to hold this event. I built Harbor Light. You are not authorized to represent it. I am Harbor Light. That sentence ended the event more effectively than the attorney could have. The interim board statement had emphasized that programs would continue without interruption. Erica had just declared that the organization and its founder were the same person. The moderator cut the microphone. The live stream remained active for another 20 seconds. We saw Erica arguing with her attorney. Elaine moved toward the stage. Several audience members began leaving, while others surrounded the reporters. Then the screen went black. Hannah leaned back against the couch. She never read the page. No. She still said enough. Yes. Owen muted the television even though the stream had ended. Comments continued beneath the black screen. Some supporters said Erica had been ambushed. Others asked why she believed unused writing was free to take. Several former donors reposted the board statement. A woman who identified herself as a Harbor Light client wrote that the organization had helped her and that consent still mattered. I closed the browser. For the first time since the wedding, Erica had spoken without me being present to serve as the visible enemy. The questions had remained on her. She could not point across a stage and ask the audience to choose which sister appeared more wounded. She had only her own explanation. Evelyn called. "Do not post anything tonight." I wasn't planning to. The board's counsel has requested a copy of the full stream. The publisher's legal team was watching. What happens now? The investigation was already nearing completion. Tonight will not decide it alone, but it does not help her. Did she violate the publisher's instruction by holding up the page? She did not read it. That matters. Her statements about permission and source also matter. Hannah looked at me. What about Elaine? Her answer is now part of the public event, Evelyn said. But she did not admit sending the pages. Do not overstate it. I won't. That was one of the strangest parts of the night. I did not feel triumphant. I felt tired. Erica had humiliated herself, but she had also taken a photograph of us as children and turned it into another weapon. She had described the years we shared as raw material, waiting for the person bold enough to use it. There had been a time when she was simply my little sister, sitting beside me on a motel floor. I did not need to deny that memory to hold her accountable for what she later did with it. Near midnight, an unfamiliar number called my phone. I let it go to voicemail. The message arrived a minute later. Erica's voice sounded hoarse. They loved that story because I knew how to tell it. You never understood that. You hide behind folders and dates because you don't know how to make people care. Now you've turned everyone against me, and for what? So you can keep pretending your silence made you better than me? I forwarded the voicemail to Evelyn before listening to the rest. You think you're getting your life back, Erica continued. You're just destroying mine. I asked Evelyn whether I should respond. She said a response was not necessary. I knew that. I also knew I did not want Erica's last direct statement to become the only answer in the record between us. Evelyn agreed to remain on the call while I phoned the number back. Erica answered immediately. You finally decided to speak. I'm speaking once. You watched. Yes. Then you saw what they did to me. I saw what you said. They twisted it. No one forced you to say my writing was unused. You did leave it. That did not give it to you. You would have let every one of those stories die. They were not dying. They were part of my life. They became useful because of me. You did not give my pain a purpose. You gave it your name. She was silent. Then she laughed, but there was no warmth in it. You always did know how to make one sentence sound final. This one is. You took my future. Your future was built on the belief that I would stay silent. I helped people. That does not erase how you did it. You think the board will choose you over me? This is not a choice between us. It has always been a choice between us. That may have been how Erica understood our family. Elaine chose one daughter. Grant chose the person paying the mortgage. An audience chose the sister whose story moved them most. I no longer accepted the premise. The board is deciding whether you can be trusted with other people's stories, I said. I'm deciding what access you have to mine. She started to speak. I ended the call. The next morning, Evelyn contacted me before 7. Harbor Light's board had scheduled the final termination review for the following week. Erica would receive the investigators' findings through counsel and an opportunity to submit a response before the 7 independent directors voted. The publisher had completed its preliminary rights analysis. They had identified multiple passages that closely tracked my unpublished work and had concluded that the documentation Erica provided did not establish permission. If the contract was terminated, they would demand repayment of the unearned portion of her advance according to the contract schedule. The speaking agency had also suspended all future bookings while it reviewed the live stream and the board's findings. None of those consequences had happened yet. Erica had not lost her position that morning. Her book had not been canceled. She had not been ordered to repay anything. But, for the first time, every institution that had benefited from her version of the story was asking the same question my family had avoided for years. Where did it really come from? The board voted the following Thursday. I was not in the room. Erica received the final investigative report through her attorney, submitted a written response, and was given the opportunity to address the 7 directors before they met without her. At 3:42 that afternoon, Evelyn called me. They terminated her for cause. I was standing between 2 shelving units in the archive room. A cart of newly processed records waited beside me. What did the board say? The final report substantiated inaccurate representations in official materials, alteration and attempted deletion of records after notice of the complaint, unauthorized use of private writings, and retaliation. Was the vote unanimous? 6-1. I closed my eyes briefly. The single vote against termination did not bother me. It made the outcome feel more real. 7 independent people had reviewed the evidence, disagreed about the appropriate consequence, and still reached the decision required by the bylaws. Erica's employment ended immediately. Her remaining access was revoked. Harbor Light appointed its interim director to serve through the end of the year while the board conducted a national search. The organization did not collapse. Its hotline remained open. Its housing partnerships continued. Employees who had never touched my journals went back to work the next morning. A week later, Harbor Light issued a corrective statement. It said several founder narratives had been inaccurately attributed and that private writings had been used without proper authorization. The statement did not summarize my childhood or identify the contents of my therapy letter. It acknowledged the misconduct without turning my life into another campaign. The publisher took longer. Their legal department reviewed the manuscript drafts, Elaine's PDF, Erica's source notes, and the side-by-side comparisons Evelyn had submitted. They also reviewed the promises Erica had made in her contract about originality, accuracy, and permission. At the end of May, they canceled the book. The email to Erica explained that the manuscript could not be published in its current form because it contained material she had not written, experiences presented inaccurately as her own, and identifiable private information for which she had not obtained consent. The $90,000 advance had been scheduled in installments. Erica had received the signing payment and another portion after submitting the manuscript. She was not ordered to produce the entire amount overnight. The publisher demanded repayment of the unearned portion on a negotiated schedule. Her speaking agency ended its representation soon afterward. Future events were canceled according to the termination clauses in those contracts. No one demanded that she repay every fee she had earned during the previous 6 years. She simply stopped receiving the income she had expected from the next year of appearances. Without her Harbor Light salary, future speaking fees, or the remaining book payments, the life she had built became difficult to maintain. The condo she rented was expensive because it placed her near downtown studios and donor events. Her car was leased. Her public image had required travel, clothing, photography, and assistance that made sense only while invitations kept arriving. By the end of June, she had given notice on the condo and returned the car. She moved back into my parents' house. Elaine told relatives that Erica had chosen to come home so the family could heal privately. Grant later told me the truth. She could no longer afford the life she had been living. None of that happened because a judge ordered her to become poor. She lost the income attached to the identity she had created, and her expenses caught up with her. Evelyn asked me to decide whether I wanted to continue toward litigation. We met at her office with a settlement draft between us. A lawsuit could seek broader damages, she said. It could also take years, and put more of the journals into the record. Possibly, Erica would challenge authorship, context, and how the materials were obtained. There would be discovery and depositions. What does the settlement give me? Evelyn turned the document toward me. Erica would agree not to use my name, letters, journals, essays, or the Room 214 story in any public, commercial, educational, or fundraising material. She would send source corrections to Harbor Light. the publisher, and organizations that had received the disputed training content. She would return any original pages or copies still in her possession and certify that no undisclosed archive remained. A limited portion of the money directly traceable to copied material would be returned, along with reasonable legal fees connected to stopping the use and the leak. She would agree not to contact me directly, retaliate, or encourage anyone else to publish my private writing. Most importantly, the unrelated parts of my journals would remain private. The agreement did not say I owned every memory of our family. It did not forbid Erica from saying she had an older sister or that our home had been unhappy. It restricted her from using my words and claiming my experiences as the foundation of her public identity. Would you consider this enough? Evelyn asked. I'm not choosing whether it's enough punishment. What are you choosing? Whether it gives me control without requiring me to expose more. It does that. Then settle. Erica resisted the Room 214 provision longer than any financial term. Her attorney argued that a motel story could not belong to one person. Evelyn replied that the restriction was part of a voluntary agreement, resolving a broader dispute involving copied writing, false attribution, and retaliation. Erica could decline and litigate. She signed. Celia contacted me after the agreement became effective. She did not ask me to forgive her. I should have called before I canceled the room, she said. The message hurt my pride, and I let that become more important than confirming whether it was true. You were manipulated. I was also willing to believe the worst version of you. That mattered more than an apology claiming she had made an innocent mistake. I'm not ready for us to act normal, I told her. I understand. We began with occasional messages, nothing more. Grant corrected the story with our relatives. He told them that I had not canceled my wedding and that he had known enough about Erica's motel story to question it years earlier. He stopped allowing Elaine to speak for him. When he wanted to call me, he asked first. I permitted one conversation every other Sunday. That was not forgiveness. It was an opportunity with limits. Elaine sent me a 12-page letter. She wrote that she had believed Erica could turn family suffering into something useful. She said she never intended to harm me and could not understand why I refused to acknowledge the good Harbor Light had accomplished. She apologized for how I felt. She did not apologize for taking the pages. I did not answer. Erica sent her final question through her attorney. She wanted to know whether I felt better now that she had lost her job, her book, her home, and the career she had spent years building. I sent one response. I don't feel better because you lost it. I feel free because it was never yours. After that, all direct contact ended. Freedom did not mean I stopped grieving. Erica had truly come to room 214 when she was 17. She had sat on the motel floor and shared crackers with me. She had rested her head against my shoulder and promised she would always keep a room for me. That memory had been real when it happened. What she did with it years later was real too. I did not have to erase the first truth to hold her accountable for the second. The wedding album arrived in the middle of July. 8 months had passed since Owen and I stood beneath the white roses while 6 family tables remained empty. We opened the package at our dining table. The photographer had captured details I had missed that day. Hannah adjusting my veil while trying not to cry. Owen's father laughing during our first dance. My coworkers standing along the aisle. The venue staff carrying one-place settings. Near the end of the digital gallery were several photographs taken before the ceremony. 6 tables covered in ivory linen. 6 centerpieces. Rows of empty chairs beneath place cards bearing the Foster name. I stared at those images longer than the others. My professional instinct told me not to remove evidence simply because it was painful. Then I remembered that the original photographs, messages, headers, access logs, and investigative records were already preserved. The album was not an archive. It was not a legal file. It was the story Owen and I chose to keep about our wedding. I removed the photographs of the empty tables from the final selection. Owen did not call it closure. He did not tell me I had finally let go. He only asked which picture I wanted on the first page. I chose one taken immediately after the ceremony. Owen and I were walking between 2 lines of friends, co-workers, and relatives from his side of the family. Some were laughing. Others reached toward us as we passed. No one in the photograph was looking at the empty section of the ballroom. For months, Erica had counted on her absence becoming the most important thing that happened at my wedding. It wasn't. My family had been told I canceled the day. They stayed home. The people who loved me came anyway. Erica lost her position, her book, and the right to keep earning money from my life. I kept my marriage, my work, my privacy, and the authority to decide which parts of my story would ever leave the room. Home was not a place someone promised to keep for me. It was where people showed up without asking me to surrender what belonged to me first. You should never mistake silence for weakness, and you should never let another person define your life simply because they speak louder. When someone uses your private pain, your work, or your memories without permission, the smartest response is not immediate revenge. First, protect the evidence. Save the messages, dates, files, and original documents. Ask for help from people you trust. And use legal or professional channels instead of fighting in public before you understand the facts. You also need to remember that setting boundaries is not cruelty. You are not responsible for protecting a liar's reputation, fixing an organization they damaged, or accepting an apology that avoids responsibility. At the same time, strength does not mean handling everything alone. Wise people accept support, listen to qualified advice, and choose outcomes that protect their future instead of feeding anger. Most importantly, do not measure family only by blood or titles. Pay attention to who shows up, respects your choices, and refuses to demand that you surrender what belongs to you. If this story reminded you to protect your voice and your boundaries, subscribe to the channel and stay with us for more stories about truth, consequences, and choosing yourself first.